Well, last week, the Fire Service Association met with members of the Ministry of National Security to speak on long-standing issues that, according to the president of the association, need immediate attention. Now, following that meeting, he described it as extremely disappointing, suggesting that they're nowhere closer to finding such solutions. We're joined now by the president of the Fire Service Association, Mr. Leo Ramkisoon. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. Extremely disappointing is how you describe this meeting with the Ministry of National Security. So, were you expecting any different?
Well, I mean, for us in the association, particularly for me, hope springs eternal. I mean, that hope is all we have to hold on to. If I'm to be realistic, I did not expect them to, be able to acquire appliances in such short notice. But we would have hoped that some measures would have been come up with to be able to bring some level of relief. This issue is not just only about the appliances. It is also the shortage of personal protective equipment for the officers as well. And whilst the appliances may take a long time to procure, and even parts, one would have hoped that at least the smaller items, such as the breathing apparatus sets and other personal protective equipment, such as uniform and gloves and so on, one would have thought that those items would be incoming in a shorter time frame. So, having gotten the information that the process of acquiring those personal protective equipment is still a ways off, such that the ministry and the administration couldn't provide a more specified time frame within which officers could expect them, then of course we would have been very, very disappointed, because I have to take into consideration that officers, as we speak, are entering into smoke-filled environment to perform firefighting. They are entering into hazardous environments with chemical spills and exposure to carcinogens and so on without breathing apparatus sets, meaning they have not enough personal protective equipment, so that they are inhaling and absorbing very deadly toxins. And all of that in an effort to conduct firefighting and rescues and to serve the public. So again, without any news that relief would be coming in short order, we of course are very, very, very disappointed.
You said you do not blame fire officers if they were to exercise their rights under sections 14 and 15 of the OSH Act by not showing up to work. Has there been any sign or any mention of such action being undertaken soon?
No, the officers, that is a difficult thing for officers to engage in. I mean, of course, when the chief fire officer made some statements last week where he sought to assign blame to officers for the conditions of trucks, officers would have felt very, 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 very unappreciated, for the least, and in many instances, very disrespected. And, there would have been discussions on the ground where officers started to consider the fact that they are making a personal sacrifice, one in which the law does not compel them to make that sacrifice. In other words, the law provides that where officers are placed at a risk to life or limb that is not reasonable in the course of their duty. In other words, it is reasonable for the employer in this instance to provide the tools to do the job. And where the employer is not doing so, they are within their rights to refuse to operate. And officers continue to operate. And I'll tell you why they continue to operate. again, it's not because they are lawfully mandated. It is because when they are called upon to respond to distress calls from the public, the mental anguish it would take to refuse to operate because they are taking a stand for the right thing, for the employer to do the correct thing, and having to weigh that against the needs of the public, it is a difficult pill to swallow. So they, in most instances, up to giving up their own self, sacrificing their own health and safety in order to do their job, so that at the end of the day, the public benefits from it. But again, the officers are coming out with the short end of the stick in most instances.
Well, Chief Fire Officer Bristow has described the association's meeting, the comments regarding the meeting with the Ministry of National Security as disingenuous. As you would have just mentioned, he also laid the blame for the conditions of fire appliances on that of fire service officers. Now, you've stood firm, you're demanding an apology and saying that you reject on all grounds the statements made by the Chief Fire Officer. Are we seeing some sort of cracks between servicemen here and the strength of the fire service as a whole? If there's no relationship, or there seems to be a breakdown in the relationship between the Chief Fire Officer and the Fire Service Association, is it now that the arguments being put forward are weakened?
Well, those statements really are unfortunate, and they seek to really undermine the efforts of the association and our advocacy for remedying the problem. The Chief Fire Officer admitted that releases were not being made available to the fire service. He admitted the shortages of trucks. He admitted all that was said, save and except that he contradicted the amount of stations that he said wasn't functional. You know, he said that there were only 5 and not 8. While those statements are unfortunate and in many instances affect officers deeply, we are not focused on laying blame and who's to blame and so on. First and foremost, the reality that must be rectified with immediacy is to put trucks in those stations and provide officers with the personal protective equipment that they need. I want to stay focused on those things. Clearly, the chief has indicated where the problem is. It is to the procurement process and so on. It is not, in fact, what he said in terms of blaming officers. So I'm not going to take that on, and I urge officers, don't let that affect you. I am saying that we must stay focused on what the real issue is, because you see, when the association and the chief fire officer and the administration engage in a tit for tat, it doesn't help the public, it doesn't help us, and so on. The issue here is that the state needs to give the support to the fire service that is needed, because from what the chief is saying to us behind closed doors is the issue is gaining the releases and so on to purchase and to actually move the organization forward. He made clear, he also said, and I'm sure you would have heard him say, he said that the chief fire officer is only able to spend up to a particular amount. I think is 100,000 or 200,000, and anything above that has to go for the PS, the permanent secretary's approval, or the cabinet. And he is asking for that to be reviewed. That alone is an admittance that he is being strangled or stymied in his ability to really address the issues in the fire service. So this is where our focus, we want to place our focus and not get engaged in a tit for tat with the chief fire officer.
Well, staying focused is one thing, but back to the issues at hand. I recently saw a report which indicates that even the structures of some fire stations across the nation is in jeopardy. I know there was focus on an incident that happened at the Roxborough fire station when officers slipped, fell. That has not been addressed. The Crown Point fire station also, that is due to be reconstructed. And even fire stations here in Trinidad and Tobago, the quality of the structure is very much hazardous. Has there been any sort of notification beyond just the procurement of fire appliances and PPE as to when such infrastructural developments will happen?
Well, Roxborough Fire Station is relatively new. That station was just constructed, and the leaks that you have I referred to in other places in that station is the leaks in the roof of the building. So that's structural issues already. So, and that is not uncommon. You have that situation also occurring in Piaco Fire Station, Santa Cruz, Sangre Grande. Many of these stations have roof leaking problems. And when you have that, you have water getting in and seeping into the walls and other parts of the infrastructure, and there's a mold buildup. And officers are becoming ill, when they occupy these buildings and so on. So, and you have many other conditions of station issues that we have been discussing with the ministry and the administration. And again, those items need the attention of the state to move the thing forward. San Juan Fire Station, the Kariri did a study of the station and found that there needs to be HEPA filters installed in the station to protect the officers, because there's a high buildup of carbon monoxide and other contaminants that the officers are living in once they occupy that station, and they are absorbing. So there were recommendations being made for some time now, and they seem to be moving at snail's pace in terms of addressing those issues. And that again is a cause for concern. Point 14 Station, Rio Claro, right? All of these stations, Siparia, Chagaramas, all of these stations have their particular issues affecting them. And all we have been getting really is discussions on them, promises, very, very slow movement. All we have is the agreement that these stations need addressing, but we don't have it actually materializing. And that's where we really need these issues to be addressed.
Well, I have two final questions. Given that we're in the dry season and there's been constant fire safety tips that have been issued, I think even you said individuals need to take some level of personal responsibility by installing fire alarms and even fire extinguishers within their homes and within their property, which is a cost to the citizen, by the way. We've also had issues with respect to water restrictions and water shortages. So even if a fire appliance is available at a fire station, is there enough water resources that are available at fire stations to tackle any emergency?
Most stations, most trucks would get water for the relevant tank of the truck, the tank of the appliance, at hydrants within the particular community. And some of these hydrants don't always have water in them. So, managing that issue takes some liaison with the Water and Sewerage Authority to ensure that a ready supply of water is made available to those hydrants where the officers replenish. Sometimes it's difficult. The truck has to go quite some distance to be refilled, but by and large, that issue has been managed. The issue really is having trucks at stations so that officers themselves can have a ready supply on the truck, having tankers to move.
Mr. Ram, yes, go ahead, sir.
And barring that, when you have trucks at stations, the officers can be easily mobilized to check hydrants and to ensure the hydrants in the community are serviceable. So the trucks have a very, very important role, not just to bring water and have a ready supply of water, but to move personnel to actually have the relevant firefighting implements and so on, like fire hydrants and so on, serviceable, so that the community will benefit from that type of protection. But yes, I want to, advise members of the public, it is in their own interests to ensure that your surroundings are kept safe from bushfires and any threats to your property and life. Ensure that your property is kept clean in terms of the vegetation, dry vegetation, and so on. Keep a smoke detector in your building. Install them. They are not very expensive. If you can and you can afford a fire extinguisher, that would be also advisable. And to go up on the internet and check on the fire service website. You will be able to get some safety tips there. Officers are always willing to try to advise members of the public as to the best ways to keep your home and your family safe.
And my final question this morning is from a historical standpoint.
Hello?
Can you hear me? Mr. Ramkissoon, are you still with us? All right, it seems as though that we've lost connectivity with Mr. Ramkissoon. My final question to him, I'm so sorry that I was not able to ask him this, but from a historical context, from independence, post-independence, and now, could we name a time when the Transbago Fire Service was actually in a good position or a good state? But unfortunately, we've lost Mr. Ramkissoon there, so thank you very much, sir, for joining us on AM Prime this morning. We'll continue to monitor the situation as it develops. Folks, we take a quick break here on AM Prime. When we return, we'll wrap things up for this morning's edition of the program. We'll be right back.